My dad lifted his glass at my sister's wedding and said loud enough for every chandelier to hear, "Some kids make you proud, others just take up space." The room laughed, small, polite, terrified laughs. My mother kept her smile perfectly still. My brother-in-law clinked his glass like nothing happened, and I sat there, every nerve on fire, realizing I'd just been erased in front of everyone I grew up with. So I smiled back steady and said, "Good thing I just got my own place 2,000 miles away. Don't worry, you'll never have to see me take up space again." The laughter died before the echo did. I stood, left my champagne untouched, and walked out of their perfect picture. That was the night they toasted their control, and I started planning my escape. Before I tell you how I left them speechless for good, tell me where are you listening from, so I know I'm not alone. And when you've heard the rest, tell me what would you have done if your own family tried to shrink you down to nothing. The night after the wedding, I couldn't sleep. The hotel air smelled like champagne and lilies, the same mix that had clung to my dress when I walked out of that room. I kept replaying it, the sound of my dad's voice over the microphone, the polite laughter that followed, the way my mother's smile never cracked. I'd always known there were rules in our family. I just hadn't realized humiliation was one of them. Back home in Indiana, the silence hit harder than the toast. My parents' house looked exactly the same, the gray shutters, the manicured lawn, the light in the kitchen that never turned off. But something had shifted. Even the air felt contractual, like I owed rent for breathing there. Dad was in his usual spot at the dining table laptop, open spreadsheets, glowing against his glasses. He didn't look up when I came in, just said, "You made quite an exit." His tone wasn't angry, it was clinical, like he was assessing damage to an investment. Mom poured herself coffee and added, "Your father's just worried. You embarrassed yourself, that's all. Embarrassed myself. That's how they rewrite it." Kelsey texted later a row of hearts and champagne emojis from her honeymoon like none of it had happened. She'd always been good at selective memory. When she flunked freshman year, they called it burnout. When I asked for help with tuition, it was irresponsibility. Same story, different narrator. For years, I'd told myself they just didn't understand me. That one day I'd do something big enough, responsible enough, successful enough to make them see me as more than an obligation. But that night, sitting in my old bedroom, surrounded by participation trophies and unpaid emotional debts, I realized they understood perfectly. They just liked the hierarchy the way it was. Dad once said to me, "If you want love, earn it." At 16, I thought it was wisdom. At 27, I finally saw the cruelty tucked inside. The love I kept trying to buy with hard work and obedience was already mortgaged to someone else, Kelsey, the daughter who never had to ask twice. The next morning, I made myself coffee in the same chipped mug I'd used since high school. I watched Dad head to the garage in his pressed shirt, Mom watering the plants I'd once killed by forgetting them for a week. It all looked so normal, and that terrified me more than the wedding ever did, because if I stayed, I knew what would happen. They'd smooth it over, rewrite the night into a misunderstanding, and I'd be folded right back into the role they built for me, useful, quiet, apologetic. But this time, I didn't apologize. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and started a new spreadsheet. It wasn't for them. It was titled Oxygen. 2 weeks passed before anyone mentioned the toast. That's how my family handled conflict, by starving it of oxygen until it learned to behave. In the group chat, Mom sent photos of Kelsey and her husband on the Amalfi Coast. Captions like, "Our bright girl living her dream." Everyone reacted with hearts and sparkles. No one tagged me. No one said a word about that night. It was like I'd been edited out of the family footage trimmed for pacing. So I played along. I hearted a few photos, dropped a polite, "Looks amazing," the same way you clap for a magician when you already know the trick. Then I went back to my new ritual. Mornings were for work, afternoons for searching jobs in other cities, evenings for building what I called the escape fund. Every time Mom texted a guilt-laced question, "Have you talked to your sister?" I sold something. A stack of books, a dress I'd worn twice an old camera. Each sale went straight into a private account named Oxygen. Every click felt like a breath. One night, Dad called. His tone was falsely gentle. "Your mother says you've been distant." I almost laughed. "I've been consistent, you just noticed." He paused, then said, "Don't be dramatic. Family's family. That line used to work on me. Not anymore. After we hung up, I opened the file on my desktop labeled Plans. Inside were job postings in Portland, Denver, Flagstaff, far enough to break the echo, close enough that I could still send postcards if I ever wanted to. Lucas called that same night. He'd been on the road for work for months, but he always checked in. "How are you holding up?" I hesitated. "I'm fine." He didn't buy it. Gianna fine is what people say when they've stopped hoping it gets better. I didn't answer. Because he was right. I had stopped hoping, just not for the reason he thought. Later, I got a text from Naomi, his ex. The kind of text that looks friendly but smells like intrusion. He says you've been thinking about moving. Portland suits you. I stared at it, fingers hovering over the screen, and then deleted it. I wasn't giving her or anyone space to narrate my life again. A few days later, Mom called, pretending to check on my health. "You sounded tired last time. You should rest." Then, like slipping a knife between ribs, she added, "Don't run away from family because of one bad night. Run away." That's what she'd call it. Not leaving, not saving myself, just running. That's when it clicked. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done negotiating. I opened Plans again and renamed it Exit. Then I booked an interview flight for Portland. The confirmation email hit my inbox like a heartbeat. The next morning, I walked past my parents' house windows, glowing lawn, perfect curtains drawn tight, and realized something they'd built a home that looked alive from the outside but couldn't breathe. And I was finally learning how to. It happened faster than I expected, the collapse, the exposure, the quiet rage that followed. A week before my interview, I got a call from Kelsey. Her voice was thin, shaky. Not the golden girl confidence everyone worshipped. "He's been gone for days," she said. "He says he needs space." I heard a small, bitter laugh through the phone. Funny how men always use your own words against you. I didn't want to get involved, but I knew that tone defeat mixed with disbelief. It was the sound I'd swallowed for years. So I drove over. Her apartment looked staged for heartbreak. Half-empty closets, wine glasses drying in the sink, a wedding photo still face down on the counter. She handed me a box and said I can't move back there alone. They're meant Indian. Our parents' kingdom. We packed in silence until she whispered, "You were right to leave." I wanted to tell her it wasn't about being right, it was about surviving. But I just nodded. By nightfall, her boxes were stacked by the door. She hugged me before I left something she hadn't done since we were kids. "Don't let them pull you back in," she said. It almost sounded like a blessing. When I got home, the house was darker than usual. Mom was sitting in the living room, phone in hand, the screen lighting half her face. "You helped your sister move?" she asked without looking up. I froze. "How did you?" Kelsey called. "Said you were wonderful. Said you told her to come home." I didn't. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "Well, she's on her way anyway, and we're having dinner Sunday. You'll be there." It wasn't a question. That night, I caught the reflection of my own face in the window, calm but hollow. I opened my laptop, checked the Plans folder, and there it was, the email from Portland's subject line, interview confirmation. For the first time in months, I felt something close to relief. I printed the offer details, packed my portfolio, and slid both into a leather folder labeled Next Chapter. Then I did something reckless. I opened the shared family bank account, the one Dad insisted on for emergencies. I transferred every cent that was mine into my personal account and hit close account. Clean, silent, legal. 2 days later, Mom's tone shifted. Her text came wrapped in sugar dinner at 6 Kelsey's cooking lasagna. That was the tell. Mom never let anyone else cook. I knew then it wasn't a dinner, it was an ambush. I charged my phone, backed up my files to a small USB, and left it in my purse. If they wanted to talk, they could do it without my plans inside their reach. At 6 sharp, I walked into the house. The table was set for 4 candles lit like a peace offering. Dad was scrolling his phone, Kelsey sitting stiff beside him. Mom poured wine and smiled like nothing had ever broken. "Sit," Dad said. I did, but this time I wasn't the one on trial. The second I sat down, I knew. The air had that heavy, artificial calm that always came before one of their talks. Candles flickered between us, the table perfectly staged like a photo shoot for forgiveness no one meant. Dad didn't look up from his phone when he started. Your cousin Mia says you've been applying out west. His tone was soft, but his words were loaded like bullets, wrapped in politeness. I kept my voice level. That's right. I had an interview. Mom set down her wine. We're just worried you're running from something, Gianna. Kelsey's eyes darted toward me, warning or apology, I couldn't tell. I smiled that practiced, dangerous calm I'd learned from them. Maybe I'm running towards something. Dad finally looked at me. His gaze had the weight of a closing door. Don't turn this into another rebellion. You've always been dramatic. Or maybe you've always been cruel, I said quietly. The room went still. Kelsey's fork clinked against her plate. Mom's smile cracked just slightly. You don't mean that. I do. My voice surprised even me. You humiliated me in public and you all laughed. You raised me on contracts and lectures, then called it love. You say family is forever, but what you really mean is obedience. Dad pushed his chair back, slow and deliberate. Watch your tone. I laughed. It wasn't loud, just sharp enough to slice through the tension. That's all you care about, isn't it, tone? Presentation. Control. You don't care if you hurt people as long as it looks civilized. He stood. We gave you everything. No, I said. You sold me everything. At interest. For the first time, his face shifted just a flicker like a crack in old porcelain. Kelsey's voice broke the silence. Dad, please. Stay out of this, he snapped. That was it. The old reflex, the hierarchy reasserting itself. But it didn't land this time. Kelsey went quiet, not from fear, but from understanding. I stood. This isn't a dinner, it's a performance. And I'm not playing anymore. Mom's voice trembled something rare. You're making a mistake. Maybe I said, but at least it'll be mine. I turned to Kelsey. Are you staying? Her eyes glistened, but she didn't speak. I nodded once and walked toward the door. Gianna. Dad's voice carried that command he'd perfected over the years, the kind that froze you mid-step. Don't walk away from this family. I looked back at him. You walked away first. You just did it slower. I left without slamming the door. Quiet exits hurt louder. Outside, the night was heavy with summer humidity. I got in my car, gripping the wheel until my knuckles went white. My phone buzzed once Mom's text, "Come home. We can talk like adults." I deleted it. Back at my apartment, the air felt still but breathable. I set my bag down, opened my laptop, and saw the unread email glowing at the top of my inbox offer. Creative Strategist, Portland. For a moment, I just stared at it. The exact kind of moment my family would call too good to be true, but I clicked it open anyway. Full-time, remote, benefits, salary higher than I'd hoped. The line at the bottom said, "We'd love to have you start next month." It was everything they said I didn't deserve. I printed the offer and slid it into my next chapter folder next to the closed account confirmation. Each document was proof that I could build something without their permission. Then I heard the faint vibration of my phone, again, unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Gianna Kelsey's voice, whispering, "They're furious. Mom found your spreadsheet. She told Dad you were planning to humiliate them by leaving." I closed my eyes. How did she find it? She went through your laptop when you were at dinner. Said she was checking the battery. Of course she did. It wasn't enough to control the story, they had to own the script. "Don't come back," Kelsey said. "They're waiting for you." Doors closed. "Please don't." My throat tightened. "Thank you." We stayed on the line for a moment, both breathing like we were afraid of being heard. Then she whispered, "I'm proud of you," and hung up. I sat there motionless. The betrayal burned, but underneath it was something steadier clarity. I pulled my suitcase from the closet, set it open on the floor, and started packing. Not the panic kind of packing, measured, deliberate. The good jeans, 2 shirts that felt like me, the leather folder, the USB. Everything else could rot here. Before dawn, I slipped out the door. The air was damp and cold enough to sting. The neighborhood was still asleep, every window dark except one, probably someone else awake and waiting for change. At the end of the driveway, I looked back at the house. The porch light flickered once like a tired heartbeat. I whispered, "You wanted me gone. Now you get your wish." The taxi arrived on time. The driver didn't ask questions. We rode in silence down the empty highway, city lights fading behind us. When the airport doors opened, the smell of coffee and floor polish hit me at once. I found a seat near the window, opened my phone, and saw another text Dad this time. "Don't make choices you can't undo." I typed back but didn't send it. Some mistakes are the only way out. Then I deleted it entirely. As the sun climbed, a voice announced my flight to Portland. I grabbed my bag, walked to the gate, and for the first time in years, felt no need to look over my shoulder. On the plane, as the engines roared to life, I closed my eyes. My father's words echoed again. "Some kids make you proud, others just take up space." I smiled soft and steady. "Then watch me take all the space I need." The plane lifted through the clouds, and I swear for a second, it felt like oxygen. Portland didn't greet me with fireworks, just soft rain and the smell of cedar through an open cab window. The apartment I'd rented was small, a little cracked at the edges, but it was mine. No rules taped to the fridge, no silent disapproval hanging in the air. The first night I unpacked slowly, each folded shirt a quiet declaration: I'm here. I'm free. A week later, the agency officially welcomed me aboard. My boss called me steady and sharp, 2 words no one in my family had ever used about me. I started sleeping through the night again. The silence didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like peace. Then a voicemail came from Kelsey. Her voice was calm, this time lighter. "I got the job in Chicago," she said. Mom cried, but it wasn't sadness. It was losing control. "Thank you for showing me it's possible." I replayed it twice. Then I smiled. For the first time, our family cycle didn't end in apology. It ended in distance. Safe, necessary distance. Outside, the rain softened to mist. I opened the window wider and breathed in. This wasn't running away. This was arriving. I sat by the window that night, city lights reflecting off the wet pavement below. My phone buzzed once another family dinner photo, the same empty chair at the end of the table. I didn't open it. Some stories don't need sequels. I poured myself a glass of water, raised it slightly, and whispered, "Here's to taking up space." The quiet answered back like a friend. If you've ever been told you were too much, too loud, or not enough, remember this. Sometimes peace sounds like your own voice uninterrupted. Tell me, what would you have done? And if you felt that, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.